it's time for another set of reviews.
Monthly what we read.
Yeah, we're talking about the books. We're catching up on talking about the books that we read in 2022. And this time, we'll be talking about the books we read in February, or at least in my case.
Thereabouts.
I will be.
For me.
Same with the last video. I guess Maki's gonna kick us off.
Oh yeah, we're gonna definitely kick off. All right, so again, just a couple of books, or rather things that I've read that I felt that we could sort of like, all right, these, I've read them, so let's talk about them. Doesn't bode well, does it? But there is Buffy the Vampire Slayer Volume 5 by Jordi Belair. It's the reboot. It's the reboot. Okay. Where, you know, Willow's gay right from the get-go.
Oh, right.
Random things happen to everybody that you just...
like random.
I say random because it almost feels like there was a dartboard and they're like, we're gonna make this person this, and then it's gonna... And this person's gonna come in really here. As somebody who literally grew up with a source material, this was a huge stretch. And as somebody who's read Elseworlds and enjoyed them, right? Can we say Speeding Bullets? Thank you very much. Probably the scariest Batman, one of the scariest Batman.
Oh yes, right.
I understand when people sort of try to take a different spin on a well-loved sort of like intellectual property. This just isn't spinning in my direction, I want to say. And I gave it all the way to Volume 5. It's not even like issue 5. It's like, that's a lot of like, all right, let's see where this goes. And I have tried so hard to really love the new Buffy. Okay. But it's just quite, you know, like especially coming from the quote-unquote canon comics that continued the TV series, right, all the way to its bitter end. It's not spinning my directions. Maybe for a younger generation they might like it. After all, it's every generation is born. We'll see if you guys like it, and if you think that's cool, great, because the old material's a little dated and semi-problematic now, so maybe this is the Buffy that this generation needs. I wouldn't know if that's the truth, but it's certainly not mine. And I certainly feel like even if I want to continue because I owe Buffy that, we'll see where we go from there. Of course, a couple of X-Men titles because this is me. Reign of X Volume 8 came out sort of like early this year, and I thought, yeah, let's do this. Still par for the course, very, very nice. It almost kind of made me want to look back, and I did, to the X-Men The End series by Chris Claremont. Speaking of Elseworlds, and again, this is how you kind of maybe want to do an Elseworld. Marvel at one point in time had like a The End series where it talks about several, you know, popular,
yes, I remember.
Right, you know, and it's like, what happens like 70 years into the future, or whatever the heck timeline you want to say. And it really does sort of cauterize a lot of the old X-Men arcs for a lot of individuals. So Kitty Pryde is, I think, running for president. It's a lot of, wow, this is another universe. Some of the X-Men have paired off, and you wouldn't think that these crack ships were things until, guess what? They're memorialized in ink. I feel that's more sort of like my speed. Like, we know it's not the original, but at the same time, this is legitimate, and there's enough homages to the original source material that you're like, all right, I think this can work. Of course, there's probably somebody out there also saying, X-Men The End, I didn't like it. Valid. But to me, it brought back some fun memories reading this back in the day. This is technically a reread. I appreciate that it's all on Marvel Unlimited. Unpaid shilling for said service. So that's pretty much my thing.
Speaking of rereads, I reread more Sarah J. Maas books.
Oh,
it's a weird assortment. It's a weird assortment this month. Okay, so we have Throne of Glass.
The Throne of Glass. Wonderful.
And then I also reread both Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. This I did a tandem read for because there's a way to do it. I'll try and find the link and give it to you guys below. Yeah, because they technically happen at the same time.
At the same time.
It is fun doing that because it breaks it up a little bit in an interesting way. I don't really have to talk much about Throne of Glass. I feel like I have talked about that series so much on this channel. It's always going to be a series that means a lot to me, despite the fact that even when I reread it, I notice new things that I either can be more critical of or fall more in love with. The series centers around an assassin named Selena Sardothian. She is pulled from the salt mines of Endovier in the first book by the Crown Prince and his captain of the guard because they have handpicked her to compete in a tournament to become the Hand of the King. Sounds like a very simple premise, and true enough, that is really the entire plot of this first book.
And this is not like Tyrion Lannister, Hand of the King. This is like when the king says these people have to die, they have to die. The
series, 8 books long, lots of stuff happens, everything kind of explodes at some point, and it is honestly, exploding to me,
all throughout.
Still my favorite Sarah J. Maas series, still the one that I think is the most well-constructed, and maybe it's just because I'm biased, because I love these characters so much, most of them anyway. I reread all 3 of those books in February because apparently I couldn't help myself. Anyway, beautiful. I also read a book called Edgewood, which is by Kristen Ciccarelli. This is about an individual named Emmeline Lark, and she is a very talented singer. However, every time she sings, it seems like she's summoning the forest of Edgewood, or the forest of Edgewood is trying to chase her.
That's cool.
When her grandfather disappears and an orb is left in his wake, she actually goes into the forest because she's heard stories and she knows that she's probably going to have to do something in order to trade herself for her grandfather's freedom.
Sure.
She crosses paths with a tithe collector named Hawthorne, and he takes her to the court of the Wood King, and stuff ensues from there. I thought it was really atmospheric. It felt very dark and lush, and it is great that it is a YA fantasy standalone. At the beginning, I was immediately drawn into it because the vibes at the start were immaculate already. But the first third, right after that, it was starting to feel a little bit clunky, and I struggled just a little bit to keep going with it. But past a certain point, it really picks up, and it was just like one of those things where I just needed to know how it was going to end because I couldn't quite guess. For me, this is another one that feels like a very compelling modern fairy tale, and I love that there's like a musical aspect to it and also a bookish aspect to it, which I thought was really phenomenal and just gave it that little extra something, you know?
That's fair.
Then I read 1,000 Steps Into Night, which is by Tracy Chi. Literally, the only reason I picked this one up, to be honest with you, is because they said it integrated Japanese folklore, and you know, anytime someone says that, I'm always automatically like, this sounds like an anime. So it's about a girl named Miyoko. I hope I pronounced it right. Miyoko. She is basically a normal person until she gets cursed and starts transforming into a demon with a deadly touch, and she embarks on a journey in order to get that curse reversed so she can go back to living her normal life. This journey comes with shenanigans, so I enjoyed this one. I liked it. I didn't love it as much as I was hoping I was going to. Again, it feels very much like a fairy tale, and the one thing that it really has going for it is that I could root for our main character. That's very important since you're trying to follow her journey. I love that she's fairly atypical. Like, I think because I went into it with the anime mindset, I kind of still have that setting in my head where I feel like the main protagonist sometimes in anime is like a little bit innocent, doesn't really know what's happening, generally just very nice, and
I mean, yeah, that's traditional.
She kind of just accepts all of this stuff happening. Right, sure. Whereas the main character in this one, she's like stubborn and she's so loud and she's so vocal about everything. And I thought it made it very entertaining.
That's also the other trope.
So I do think actually if this ever got made into an anime, it's one I would watch because the entire setup for it is just enjoyable. Yeah. All in all, so that was that one. And then I randomly ended up reading a nonfiction book called Reading People. This is by Anne Bogle. It was interesting, I guess. It wasn't what I was expecting. That's probably on me, not so much on the book. It basically gives you a brief look into different kinds of personality tests and personality types and how you can sort of evaluate yourself and consequently different parts of your life through those different lenses.
Right.
I honestly feel like I didn't retain that much information, and maybe that's because a lot of it is just introduced to you at a very basic level. You really have to deep dive into specifically those different kinds of types in order to really get something out of it, I think. I also went the audiobook route with this, which I think didn't help either. I think if I tried to read it physically or maybe through ebook, I probably would have retained more or like felt more of an impact. It was fine. Like, it wasn't terrible either. It wasn't a waste of time. It was just like fine. The last book I'm going to mention in this section is a historical romance. It's been a hot minute since I talked about one. This is The Heiress Gets a Duke. Harper St. George, I feel like you want to say something. You can say it.
I mean, it's been a running joke that every time the word Duke exists in a romantic book title, you just replace it with a D and it's the same story.
Anyway, this is about an American heiress named August. She has aspirations for herself. She's actually very involved in her family's business and she really wants to stay involved in that. She's also not your typical like wallflower, your typical dainty, contained female. And so at the beginning of the book, her parents decide, hey, instead of you, because you're so we're going to offer your sisters hand in marriage to someone because we need to make an advantageous match. And so she takes it upon herself to make sure that her sister doesn't end up trapped in a loveless marriage because she wants her sister to be happy. This means she's going to cross paths with one of her sister's suitors who she doesn't think is suitable for her sister, and shenanigans ensue. If you've read historical romances, you will know that this is a fairly typical plotline. We have seen it in other stories and other books. I did like it in this one. I especially liked the guy in this one because I thought that I don't know, I just enjoyed him as a character, and it's rare because normally I prefer the heroine over the hero, and this one is the opposite. I prefer the hero over the heroine. Surprisingly, it took me longer to read than I thought considering it's such a short book, and normally I blitz through historical romances. I liked it. Again, it's another one where I thought it was good, and I enjoyed parts of it for sure. There were some moments where I was like, oh, that's so great, and then there were other parts where I was kind of like, this is fine. I know a lot of people have enjoyed this one. For me, I'm just like, it was alright. Like, it's okay. That was also a read for my family book club, by the way, so And yes, I chose it. Did not end well for us, apparently. Let's move on to the books that we want to gush a little bit about, shall we?
And get my jokes out of the gutter. A couple of things. So again, we started off with a vampire hunter type story, fighting demons, and it sort of like didn't sit well. Scott Snyder actually came up with Comixology sort of like original, which is called We Have Demons. And it is a...
Demons.
It's all... I wouldn't...
Sorry, demons.
Who doesn't love Max Lightwood? The other... Well, both. That's fine. We can both love them.
Yes.
There's two of them. So We Have Demons is basically great lore, is all I'm saying. And by great, I mean nice, accessible, fun, deep, but not too deep where you need like 5 volumes of compendiums to like figure that out. But it's also sort of like irreverent lead character, also female, and just wants to sort of like kick ass. And there's a legacy there. I liked it. It was nice. I feel that's a great way to sort of like say, all right, this is how you do like a demon modern kind of fast-paced story. It did not drag at all, so I kind of like that one. Of course, it's Scott Snyder, so of course the pacing should at the very least be cool. Last but certainly not least was a reread of Lyriel and Aborzen by Garth Nix, and these gorgeous, gorgeous covers. For whatever reason, I think in January, February, I was just like, we gotta reread this because
Probably because you had just come off reading
Terseal and Eleanor?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that just sort of makes you hunger for more of the world. I have gifted the Aborzen series, the trilogy, to quite a number of friends whom I like, which is maybe not a lot of people.
And me.
And so, well, yes, of course you.
I'm just pointing
just
that
because
out
I
for
sort of
everyone's
like the last time I was in Australia where I bought the Aborzen series for the first time, I was with family and one of my cousins who does read, I just like, you have to read this thing. She's like, all right. So I got her like, just read it on the plane, and she finished it. She loved it because that's just how much I believe in this story. The premise is still fresh. Let us rehash it again. In a world where the dead don't stay dead, the Aborzens, with the use of their 7 bells, keep the dead dead. And each bell, once
That's a good
rung,
premise, really.
it's so fresh. And each bell, when rung, has a different effect on the dead and the living. The Aborzens are sort of like the stalwarts, the guardians against these things coming from death into life and having them just, okay, you know what, everybody stay back. This is an end to the trilogy. It sort of is the highest point, I want to say, of the Aborzen saga throughout centuries, because it does not get any bigger than the story that is unwound here. Not that the other stuff that after this wasn't good. I still liked it, because that's just good storytelling now. Because outside of the large apocalyptic plot, where do you go from there? Apparently there's places, and it's good, and that's how good Garth Nix is.
Like, there's places.
Yeah, and that's just good storytellers for you. So thank you, Garth Nix, for this amazing series.
I really have to reread those books.
It's so good.
It's been a while.
I reread them almost every year.
So funny because the pattern of the books I'm going to talk about is also the same. There's like one that's new to me and then something else that I reread.
There you go.
So the first one we're going to talk about is the one that's new to me, and that's Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This is such a pretty edition. We're just going to have to take a minute. Main character in this one is Olivia Pryor. She's grown up in a boarding school for girls. Doesn't really know anything about her past. All she has left of it is her mother's journal, which is the only thing that brings her comfort. Olivia also cannot speak. She has no voice. At the beginning of the book, she gets an invitation to go home to the place her mother is from, a place called Gallant. But when she arrives there, she realizes there are a lot of family secrets and mysterious things and going on over there. The thing about Victoria Schwab, V.E. Schwab, the thing about her is that, honestly, she just comes up with such creative and compelling stories. Like, I don't know where she gets them. They all have a similar vibe, but they're very different. Like, I can't really compare them too much, at least in my opinion. I feel like
there's definitely a point
specifically different. Unlike some of the other stories she's written, which are a little bit more action-packed, this one is definitely more character-driven and quiet in a way. It draws heavily on the atmosphere, the vibe, really, of the story to really invite you to come in, to sit with Olivia, to see her story through to the end. I really think her brain is such a fascinating place because, like, how do you come up with stuff like this? Like, how? Beautiful. Like, I don't know how she does it, because each story I've read from her has left a different sort of impact on me, and I feel like every time I pick up something new, I'm just guaranteed to have a story that is compelling, got characters that I'm willing to follow through to the end, but also explores themes that I didn't necessarily see coming at the beginning of the book, and that happened with Gallant for sure. I quite enjoyed it. This book also has some illustrations in it and like some sort of formatting. I don't want to show them to you because it kind of ties into the story itself, but like, Gallant was a surprise. I knew I was gonna like it because it's Victoria Schwab, but I didn't realize I was gonna enjoy it as much as I did. And for the reread, which I'm sure is going to appear again in some other video, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas.
Boy.
The thing about
the sigh though.
The thing about House of Earth and Blood is, like, I knew what was gonna happen in it. Like, I have experienced this entire story already, and I've, like, you know, revisited it in my mind every so often, and it still had the same emotional impact. Like, I I don't know what else to tell you. Like, I still got emotional, and I also have like a bazillion tabs in there now. House of Earth and Blood is the first book in Sarah J. Maas's officially announced adult series.
Finally they put her stuff in adult, which is ironic because
it follows Bryce Quinlan, and she ends up getting drawn into an investigation into something that happened a couple of years ago. And things kind of go from there. She ends up teamed up with an angel named Hunt Athalar. There's a lot more to this story. I'm trying not to be too spoilery about it. Suffice to say, like, even knowing where Bryce's journey goes, like how she is at the start and who she is by the end of the story, this book is still so good. I find the world really interesting. I think the story is compelling. I quite enjoy Bryce as a main character. She's the best individual to follow just for the sake of this story. I really enjoyed revisiting House of Earth and Blood. I still would say, like, novel-wise, like as a single individual novel, this is also one of the ones I think Sarah did a really good job with. Like, it's probably in my top 5, top 3, and I quite enjoyed it. That brings us to the end of this. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have thoughts, comments, questions, feelings about any of the books that we mentioned, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below, and we will talk to you soon. Bye!